Just three ordinary guys trying to understand the crazy world around them. We don't have all the answers, but we've got all the questions. You're listening to Just Add Bourbon with Jimmy, J.D., and Brad.
What's up, everybody? My name's Jimmy Don Kerr.
I'm J.D. Dammer.
And I'm Brad Broaddus.
And you're listening to the Just Add Bourbon podcast. It's another beautiful Sunday evening here in the hills of eastern Kentucky. Guys, we've got a variety of topics to talk about tonight. But before we get into those topics, I do want to tell all the listeners out there, or ask a favor of all the listeners out there, to go to YouTube. We now have an audio YouTube channel. We would really appreciate it if you guys would go and subscribe. At some point, I think we want to try to monetize this thing, and YouTube's a good way to do that. And I think you have to have 1,000 subscribers to even have a chance to monetize it. So we do want to ask everybody to check out our YouTube channel. It's Just Add Bourbon podcast, and we'd appreciate it. All right, guys. So let's get into the topics this week. It's been kind of a weird week. I think the first thing we might want to get into is our man Ed Buck. And I would say most people have not heard of Ed Buck until maybe the last week or so. Did you guys know who Ed Buck was?
No idea.
All right, now Brad and I have been talking about this cat for a couple of years. As we've kind of dove into the whole, pedophile rings going on around the country, and a lot of the politicians, big money people that are involved in this. We just had the Jeffrey Epstein thing, last month. And so this guy's kind of cut from a similar cloth. And I guess what put him on my radar was a couple of years ago, there was a young, gay, black man had an overdose in his apartment. And he overdosed on meth, essentially. Nothing ever really came out of that. It was ruled as an accidental overdose. Almost exactly a year later, another young black gay man overdosed in this guy's apartment. And then just recently, there was a young man in his apartment. They're calling him Joe Doe. They're not releasing his name yet. And he was overdosing, and he asked Mr. Buck to take him to the hospital. And he told him no, tried to hold him there against his will, and somehow he escaped and was able to call 911 from a local gas station. And that's really where it kind of blew up on Mr. Buck. Now, Mr. Buck was, I guess you would call, a wealthy Democrat donor. He gave a lot of money to some pretty influential people in the Democrat Party. It turns out he was actually a conservative Republican at one time. And then he got into the LGBTQ community, into activism for that group. And really, probably the LGBTQ community out in California have been on this guy for a couple of years, have been after this guy because they knew what was going on. So it's kind of a weird story. It kind of ties into the whole Epstein thing. And you really probably hadn't heard about this guy unless you were actually looking over the past couple of years. So, JD, when you heard that story, what was your first reaction?
I just think it's what really stood out to me is they call him this guy Dr. Kevorkian. Like, this guy's known for doing this. Like, this ain't.
It's like a sexual fetish for this guy. He likes to get these people jacked up on meth.
Oh, okay.
No, that's what he does. It's a sexual fantasy. It's like a sexual fetish for this guy. Yeah. He basically gets them really, really high on meth and then takes pictures. They found all kinds of pictures of people in compromising positions. I think
one of these guys they found, I guess they found him naked in Buck's bed, and Buck was laying on the floor. I think the guy was wearing socks. Deader than 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it just seems crazy, and it has to be a fetish or something where the elevator's not going all the way up. As successful this guy is, he wants to take these homeless men and basically overdose them after he has sex with them. It seems weird, man.
I think he likes to get them high and then do stuff with them.
Yeah.
And then if they OD, and they all kind of have there's a similar pattern.
But some of these guys aren't even meth heads. Like, they're just regular people. They're homeless, but they're not drug addicts. Some of them aren't. Some of them, like, refuse to take the drug, and he forced the drug on them.
Yeah, I think it was the second guy that passed away. They said in his journal that the reason that he was a drug addict is because this guy forced him and shot him up with meth. And so I guess the thing that really kind of stuck out to me about the whole story, Brad, was you don't really hear about this anywhere until this most recent thing. Until this most recent instance. That was really the first time it probably hit the mainstream media. And then they've actually now filed federal charges against this guy. Because they originally arrested him for running a drug den. And now they filed federal charges against him for the murder of the second young man that passed away. So, why do you think, and here's, I guess, what kind of stuck out to me is why are the social justice warriors not more outraged about this guy than they are?
That's a good question. Because this was not just a nobody. This guy, he was a mega donor. He was actually an elector on the California Electoral College, one of 55 people. This guy, had influence. He was friends with Ted Lieu, Adam Schiff, tons of people, big names, and that's probably why you're not hearing about it. And to your point about where are the social justice groups on this, there was some small protest outside his place that I think was a couple dozen people. There was some protests locally.
That was just locally, right, in California.
Right. But if you break this down and you say, okay, these were, he was preying on people's misery. He was taking these people, I think primarily homeless people, or people that were in bad shape, bringing them in, and to your all's point, was shooting them up with drugs for his own. I mean, there's a lot more to the story, and graphically, not even going to get into it on the show. Don't even want to talk about it on the show, but a lot of things with a lot of toys and things they found and things he was doing and injecting them for his own pleasure. It's sick. So the thing that jumped out at me, because we've talked about this for a couple of years since the first guy died. So if you go down the list, the victims are minorities, specifically black men is what it seems like at this point. He was an LGBTQ activist himself.
And he'd actually done a lot of good things for that community.
So you would think that there would be more nationwide of condoning that. No, he does not represent us. And he's a white male that has a lot of money. That meets every criteria for the Social Justice Warrior Olympics. But the media doesn't want to cover it, and that should just show you, look, I'm for a lot of these causes. Even the things or lifestyles or things I might not personally agree with, I want everybody to be treated fairly. I want everybody to have fair opportunities. But the issue with a lot of these groups is they are told by somebody, the media or whoever, what they're going to make a story about. Something can happen to one person in a remote area, and you've got the media, you've got a march of a couple thousand people there just on a second's notice. But then when you've actually got somebody in the minority community that's harming these people, I mean, you don't just have, you've got the sexual part of this, you've got the drugs. Where's everybody at? Where's Al Sharpton? Where's Sean King from Black Lives Matter? Who's speaking up in the LGBTQ community saying, hey, and I'm not hearing anything from anybody.
Right, and this wouldn't even have come out if the other kid hadn't gotten away. He just happened to get away from him and was able to get somewhere where we could call the police, because I was reading, number one, I could never figure out where this guy actually made his money. The only thing I could figure out is he bought some company that provided driver's license information to insurance companies. and he sold it for several $1 million, several years later.
I think it was like a Silicon Valley thing, like an app or something. It was
It was something.
Technological.
And then after that, so he's a millionaire, big time donor. I mean, he's buddies with Hillary Clinton. He's buddies with all these people. But the first victim's mother actually came out and like really kind of pushed this, but never got anywhere. Because I guess this guy was a wealthy, like you said, he's a wealthy white man. And in California, of all places, where, that place is very different, in my opinion, from the rest of the country, the way they do things socially. And nothing. I mean, me and you were talking about this, no joke. We were talking about this guy 2 years ago when this first happened. And we were like, man, this is crazy. They're going to jump all over this guy. And then radio silence. Nothing.
And you see this with anything that has to do, and I hate to be a broken record. I feel like every show that I'm bringing something up, but these things this information is out there. It's public information. And you will not get it turning on the TV. Never. So the things that should be the top stories, like Project Flickr. Have you ever heard of Project Flickr?
I have, but
I have not. No idea. Is that
okay, so you had hundreds of Pentagon officials caught running a child porn network on the official Department of Defense computers. So when this originally happened, it was just kind of brushed under the rug. And then it's come back up, and there's actually been, they're trying to push some legislation now. I think, I want to say Chuck Grassley, and there's some bipartisan support for this to pass a bill to stop this from happening on government computers. So let's back up just a second. I'm going to say that again. We're going to have to pass a bill as a country to make it illegal to push child pornography on government computers. It's insane.
That is insane.
I mean, it seems like that should be one of those common sense things. Like, and what's really fascinating about it is like, oh, there's some bipartisan, agreement on it. Well, yeah, there should be. It should be a unanimous decision, right?
I mean, that should just be something you write up in your policies and procedures in everyday business.
And if you do this, we're going to take you back and shoot you in the face.
Right. I mean, it's crazy. Now, this guy is one of the sick ones. I mean, I just wonder, because he actually did some really good stuff for the LGBTQ community. Right. I mean, if that was a concern of yours, and he actually really did some good things for them. He was able to get, I think it was, I want to say Double Quick, that's locally. What's the popular one? It's in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven, where he was able to get their owner to provide health insurance to their employees who had HIV or AIDS.
Right.
Prior to that, they wouldn't even provide it to them. And so the man did some good things. But it makes me wonder, was this is how he found his targets?
I don't know. Like, here's one of the things, man. That's the difference between real life and the movies. I remember growing up and watching movies, and as soon as you turn the movie on, you knew what the bad guy looked like. Right? He wore black. I remember the Westerns, man. He was in black, and the good guy was in white, right? And you knew within 5 minutes, that guy's going to die for his movie. So, But that's not real life, man. Just because you do some bad things don't mean you don't have some good things that you do as well. That's like, we've already identified this guy as a Democratic donor, and he was. But I don't know, that don't have really anything to do with...
It really doesn't have anything to do with
the acts that he's doing, what I'm saying here. That's how we're identifying him, and we all do that too. Like, oh, the Republican senator from Arizona. No, I'm not saying any of that, but just because people get caught up doing things doesn't make them all good or real bad. Like, that's just human nature, man. We all have good things about us. We don't have bad things about us. And to say that this guy is evil for doing this, sure he is. But that don't mean he can't do good things. And like you said, he has done good things. So, I don't know, man. I just think that's how life is. We're all that way. We all have our good things about us, and we all have our bad things.
But I don't think that we have our good things and then we go rape people or shoot them up with drugs.
No, absolutely not. Right.
Yeah, this guy's on it, like JD said, the elevator's not going all the way to the top floor.
And I think your point to to access, something, because I remember, just like you said, when we were kids and you'd watch these things on TV, and the bad guy was always wearing one of those black things over his eyes.
Yeah, mask.
Right, and he had a big, ugly, evil chin. And that's one of the things I think as kids, that you grow up thinking that you're going to be able to know who the good guys and who the bad guys are. And then you'll see these people that get caught up in this, whether it's drugs, whether it's trafficking, whether it's anything, and then they're like, oh my gosh, this was a preacher, this was a camp counselor, this was whatever, I can't believe that. Well, no joke, that's why they picked that field. If you were into that kind of thing, to get access, where do you want to go? Right? Like if you want to steal money from a bank,
Be a teller.
you might be a teller. If you want to diddle kids, you might try to work at a youth camp. Right? These people are going to work around where they have access to whatever they're trying to do.
Sure.
So I think because I think you're right in what you're saying. The fact that he's a Democratic donor doesn't matter, except for probably the wealth and the access probably kept him out of trouble.
Right. No, that is a good point. I agree with that. Sure.
But it also leads to something we've talked about on here 1,000 times. Since 1,000 times we've done 8 episodes. But we've talked about it a bunch of different times, and it also leads into something else that happened last week, is with Justin Trudeau,
right,
and the whole blackface controversy. Now, Brad and I were talking, and I think it's probably important. I'm gonna let Brad explain this because I asked the question. I said, I've never understood the blackface controversy. Like, why that's even controversial. Because every single time you see somebody dressed up with blackface, they're dressed up. It's like Halloween.
As a black person.
As a black person, they're just dressed up.
And this is no exception here.
Right. And so Brad explained to everybody why that's even a big deal.
Well, I'm pretty sure where this came from was back in the, probably started around the 1830s, mid-1800s. And people would use shoe polish or whatever and paint their face black and kind of accentuate their lips to make them look bigger in these plays, kind of making fun of black people.
Right.
And so, you said, what I thought was funny about the headlines is it wasn't blackface.
Oh, it was brown face.
It was brown face.
Well, that'll bring me to my point. That'll bring me back around to my point. But I wanted to make sure people knew kind of, and I think when we were talking, you told me like even in the movies and things like that, when, African Americans didn't really have any rights at that time, if they wanted to portray a African American character in the movie, then it'd be a white person with their face painted. And so that over the years has become, I guess, a racist thing. Now, the point I was kind of getting back to, and even with Ed Buck, what we were talking about is, like I said, Brad and I have known about this guy for 2 years, but we are looking and doing research in places that a lot of people aren't doing research. If you're getting your news from the TV, then you're not going to hear about this cat. So with Justin Trudeau and with Ed Buck, in the last 1.5 to 2 years, really since Trump has been president, the left have set the rules on what's acceptable or politically correct. Right. So like with blackface or with Kavanaugh, with those guys, they've set the rules. Now, when one of their guys from their side does something just like Trudeau, and I swear, JD, I didn't even think it was that big of a deal. The dude was dressed up like in college at a Halloween party, and he happened to have, makeup on, but the media doesn't call it blackface, they call it brownface. And so if it applies to the right, it has to apply to the left too.
Sure. But here's my question. Halloween's approaching us pretty quickly, right? I love Halloween. It's probably my favorite holiday.
Me too, brother.
I really enjoy it.
I love it too.
Brad, if I was going to dress up as a devil, what do you think I'd put on?
I guess you paint your face red and put some devil horns on.
Right, because that's the stereotypical devil, right? If I was going to dress up as a black person, what would be something I would wear?
Afro.
An afro. And how would I paint my face?
Paint
black, right? Because, and that's not being racist. That's just the way things are, right? So this Justin Trudeau, he's had this issue has come up with him twice now. One time it was blackface. When he was in college, or no, I'm sorry, when he was in high school, he was at a talent show, and he sung Deo by Harry Belafonte, you know, Deo, the Banana Boat song, whatever.
Sure.
And so he put a black wig on and painted his face black. And that's the first episode of Justin Trudeau as a blackface. The next time happened in 2001, and guess what he dressed up as? An Arabian. Guys, I'm not racist. You're not a racist among my body. But what color skin do most Arabs have?
Brown skin.
Brown skin, right? So wouldn't it make sense to paint your face brown?
Yeah, but again, and I don't disagree with you doing. I mean, like Brad and I were talking about it too, and I was like, man, I don't even see what the big deal is. But there has been a set of rules set out by the mainstream media, and I hate even saying on the left and the right, but it's true. On the left, they have set out rules. If there was somebody on the right, dude, they would crucify them.
Right. But here's the problem, and it goes back to I'm sorry, Brian, but even when Kavanaugh was trying to get put in office, how far back do you have to go, man? I mean, are we allowed to have mistakes, man? Are we allowed to be human? Do we got to be perfect for all of our lives? I don't like that, guys. I want people who represent me that are like me. I want people who've made mistakes, who've been through the fire, who may have made some financial poor decisions in the past that now doing well. Some people who've been maybe divorced. That don't bother me, man. That's all right. You're human. You're allowed to mess up. You don't have to be the Manchurian candidate to get my vote. You don't have to be.
No, and I agree with you all on this. You know, I've always thought that it was ridiculous that, you know, the things that somebody did
when they were in college,
or 10 or 15 or 20 years, and that aren't even a big deal. You know, I know it's not extremely diverse where we live here in Eastern Kentucky. You know, I grew up in Central Kentucky, was quite a bit more diverse there, and I've lived multiple places in the country. So you just didn't think about racism the same way, right? And the things that you say, even with your friends of different races, like even when I was in college, I was on a very diverse baseball team. We cut up with each other. There was a lot of self-deprecating conversations that we would have. You know, they would joke around with me because I was the hillbilly, you know, because I had an accent, and, you know, we'd joke around and they would talk about, well, you know, we had to get him some teeth and some shoes when he came here and all that stuff, and we would go around and poke at each other and make fun of each other. That was terms of endearment. That wasn't that we were being racist in any way. So if you're going to go back to when people were in college and nitpick this stuff, it's ridiculous. But here's what the issue is. Because I'm all for that. But if you are going to sit on the throne and represent yourself as the king of diversity and tolerance, then you have set a different standard and you're setting yourself up to be a target. And that's what he's done because he travels. This is not the first, you know, he went to India a couple years ago and pissed everybody off because he's dressed up as everybody. I mean, you can find pictures. He's dressed up like everybody. So, and I don't think because he wore blackface or did this that the guy's inherently racist. I don't believe that. But if he is racist, he is an equal opportunity racist because he's dressed up as everybody.
And I agree with you that when you are held to a higher standard when you hold a political office or something like that. But I still don't think that's the issue. I don't think he did anything wrong. I think he was a young man that dressed up in a costume, and for whatever reason, for political purposes, they went back and said, oh no, he's a blackface. My problem is with who set these rules. Who set the rules? And if you're going to set the rules that this is wrong, look, man, I was an idiot in college. I mean, I was a pure idiot.
Huh?
I hate to think that if I ever ran for political office of any kind, that they would judge me based on what I did 20 years ago, 25. I'm a different person today than I was when I was in college. A completely different person. I have different, I don't want to say morals. My morals are basically the same, but I'm much more conservative. I've grown up.
Your perspective is different, man.
It's incredibly different. And so what I'm saying, I don't disagree. Like Trudeau, he wears me out because he acts like he is Mr. High Almighty. He drives me nuts. But In this particular scenario, I don't think he did anything wrong. I think he got dressed up in a costume 20 years ago, and now somebody's trying to throw it in his face. My problem is with who set the rules. The left set the rules on this. And they won't even talk about him. Like, it's out there, but if this would have been somebody on the right, and this is the part that aggravates me, if this would have been somebody on the right, they would have, we would be talking about it. It would be the headline on every news show. That's all they would talk about, a bunch of racists, and that's the part that drives me nuts in the whole thing.
Right. I mean, I agree with you. I think, and like you said, there's not a lot of diversity around here. And I try to put myself in other people's shoes, but it's hard because I don't know what it's like to be prejudiced against based on my race. I don't. But I just don't see the issue with him doing it. Now, your point that the left does set these standards, and that's the problem because you set these standards that nobody can ever meet, man. And you're not allowed to have a mistake in your past. And go back to the Kavanaugh thing. How far back do we have to go, guys? I mean, we were talking about Kavanaugh, which I know you want to get to again today, but we're talking about 20 plus years ago, right? I mean, this guy was in high school when some of these things were supposed to happen.
Well, the Kavanaugh thing, you're right. I mean, how far do you got to go back? Yeah. Thank God, I mean, for this guy's sake, thank God he was, OCD when he was 18, 19 years old and kept a record of everything he did. Mm-hmm. Or else they would have drove him nuts. But what happened to him this week was the New York Times wrote an article that said that he had sexually assaulted another woman. And they took this information from a book that had been written. Well, the key part that they left out was that the woman in question doesn't remember it ever happening. Well, they left that part out. So you get this big left-wing media firestorm on every mainstream media station.
For a third-party rape accusation. When the victim has no recollection of anything like that ever happening. And some of our presidential candidates, Kamala Harris, and I'm going to point her out because she drives me bananas, but Kamala Harris says, he should be impeached. Well, it concerns me if our presidential candidates or even people who are running, the Senate and Congress don't do a little background check on what they're going to say before they say it. Because then it comes out that the New York Times had actually left out a major piece of the story. And here's how that works: is you'll see these stories come out. A lot of this stuff comes out and it gets this big pop on Twitter. So they release this story saying, here's another accusation on Kavanaugh. And it gets 5,000 retweets. Then 3 days later, they'll do a retraction that gets 150 retweets.
Right.
So what you've put into the public psyche is already there. The damage is already done.
And the part that I don't get for these guys, JD, is that they continue to do this over and over and over again and are proved wrong over and over and over again. But yet they keep doing it. I mean, at what point do they truly lose credibility?
They basically have lost credibility.
And at what point do our politicians lose credibility for repeating and regurgitating this stuff, man? They're not even following up on what's being said.
Right. But no, in all fairness, that happens on both sides of the aisle. We've even talked about on this we talked about Trump signing a deal with China. We're going to see him rise to China. It never happened though. But it got reported by Fox News that we're going to see him this rise to China, and we're going to start trading with China. It's going to be great for our economy, great for our farmers. But guess what? Fox News didn't report. That deal got canceled out. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So to find a fair and balanced perspective in this world today is almost impossible to do.
But don't you think that's even a little different though than what they're doing in that case? They're literally trying to destroy a man over political ideology. All right, so we didn't sell some rice to China, but we ended up selling it all to Japan. So my question is I don't even know what my question is. It's just, I just don't find that fair. It's just different.
And it is guilty until proven innocent. It's the complete opposite of everything that the country was structured on. You're guilty until proven innocent. And it's happening over and over and over. And I say with all these people, right? Like it looks real bad for Ed Buck, right? It looks real bad for the Epsteins and for all these people. But I will be the first person to stand here and say everybody says execute them, do this, whatever. Everybody has their right to prove their innocence, and the process needs to happen.
Sure, because once you give that up, man, how far, that's when the pendulum really starts to swing, right? So when you start giving up these rights, saying, oh, well, this guy's guilty, let's take him out. And you hear people around here all the time, let's bring back public executions, let's just take them out and shoot them. Look, man, I understand you want to be the tough guy, but let's not give up our right to due process, right?
Well, how many people are you seeing now that have been in prison for 25 years and then
Sure.
now with DNA and different technology, they find out they're innocent?
Hey, and say all you want to about Kim Kardashian, but she's a driving force behind a lot of that. And she's working with, I know, President Trump and getting a lot of these people out of prison that
especially non-violent offenses,
right?
Drug,
Sure.
somebody got busted. I think the first lady sold some marijuana.
Oh,
Sold what?
Yeah.
And was in jail for like 20 years. And I agree with you. That's just the part, and because I try to look at the people who have left ideology or democratic ideology, so to speak.
Right.
Like I look at you. You're an issues person. You're very open-minded. As far as like one thing we have debated, you and I have debated at the softball field here on this podcast, and we've talked, and you're very open-minded. And so, like, that's the question I want for you. I guess I want to ask you, as my friend and as my liberal friend at that, is, yeah, you're right. It does happen on both sides, okay? But it sure seems like it happens a whole lot more on the left. And maybe that's because of the mainstream media and they lean left. So, like, as a Democrat yourself and someone who leans that way, does that bother you that keeps happening?
It does, yeah, because I want to know the facts. At the end of the day, you have your opinion on things, and you have your opinion on things, and I have my opinion on things. But what do the facts say? I don't want you twisting the facts, changing the numbers. I just want to know what the facts are, and let me make my opinion based on that. But it goes back to what we talked about, I think, our first episode, even on the internet, and more you look into these cable news shows, it's just a wild, wild west.
Dude, it's a joke.
These guys get on there and get interviewed, and they can say whatever they want to, and you take it. Dude, you don't have time to look up everything. There's no way you can research all this stuff everybody says. So you're just hearing, Sean Hannity say this, and you just, oh, well, that must be true. No, it's not true. Or you're hearing Juan Williams say this, well, it must be true. No, it's not necessary. There's no way you can keep up and research all this stuff and be a balanced person.
You're not going to get any of it on TV. It doesn't matter what you watch. You're not going to get any. And once we can come to the understanding that you're not going to get the news, whether it doesn't matter, Fox, CNN, whatever.
Right.
You've got 90% of the media on TV is owned by 6 companies, and if you look at what all these 6 companies own, it makes sense why you don't get the news when you watch TV.
And it's very
you ever thought about why it's called television programming? Think about that for a second.
What?
Programming.
They're programming us.
It's
George Orwell, baby. I'm telling you right now.
Everybody should go read the book 1984.
For sure, man. I'm telling you.
They really should. And it will blow your mind as to what that man wrote however many years ago and what's happening right now.
And also Animal Farm.
Animal Farm's another one.
Because
That's another good book.
That was because I read 1984 and I was like, man, this seems a little bit unrealistic. Really, that was my first. But then I read Animal Farm and I was like, man, now that guy's got it on. But now you see both of these things, balancing each other out and this goes back to the Patriot Act. It goes back to President Obama, and now happening with President Trump. You're expanding the power of the President of the United States. It's not a good thing, guys. We need checks and balances.
I agree with
Just
you.
because you like the guy who's in there now doesn't mean you're going to like the next guy. But once that power's been given away, you have a hard time wrestling it back.
I agree with that 110%. I said that's just the part. And even now, the New York Times. When I was growing up, first time I ever went to New York City, I wanted to see the New York Times. I thought that was the coolest thing, And now it's a trash paper too. The Post. Everything. You cannot believe anything that's written anymore. And it's to your point, man. I said it really is to your point. There's no way you can look it all up, But at this point, what concerns me the most as an American citizen and as a person who just wants to know what's actually happening out there is where do I actually go to find the information? Now, Brad and I dig a lot and talk a lot, and I think having conversations like this will help you get closer to the truth and reading that crap will.
Oh, sure.
You know that it is insane times when the Babylon Bee, right, which is intentionally satire. It is hilarious, but it is satire. But about half of the headlines on the Babylon Bee are more realistic than the actual news that you're seeing, right? Like they're making fun of stuff, but a lot of it's pretty well in line with what's going on.
Brad, this is our what? This is our eighth or ninth?
I think this is our eighth.
Well, how many times have you go, all right, boys, we're ahead of the news. And we're just throwing stuff off the wall here a lot of times. And we're coming up with, in the next week, what this happens, what that happens, in the next week, bam, there's the headline. And Brad like, all right, boys, we're ahead of the news cycle.
So I've got a question for you all because you brought this up a minute ago with, how far do we go with some of the social justice type issues? And Joe Biden made a comment and said, in prison, the determination should be that your sexual identity is defined by what you say it is, not what in fact the prison says it is.
Oh.
Does anybody see a problem with that?
Well, so
I'm definitely a woman.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right, that's the first thing I
Because
thought.
I'm cleaning the house, boys.
That's exactly what I thought too. I was like, well, dude, if I ever go to jail, I'm a woman.
Right, so if you think, okay, I'm getting ready to go on a 30-year stint here, not really wanting to have a rendezvous with Bubba, I identify as a woman, put me in this prison. That stuff is getting absolutely ridiculous.
JD, you sure you don't want to come over here to the right? And with Biden,
I'm an issue guy, man.
So here's my question on that.
Okay.
And if people continue to support, and look, I have no problems with what people want to wear, how they want to dress. I don't want anybody in my bedroom. I'm not going to get in anybody else's. That makes no difference. I'm going to love everybody the same no matter what they wear, how they dress. But when you get into these issues of somebody can go to prison with whoever they want to, so the thing that confuses me about it is, okay, you've got in however many states now, you've got track stars that are winning state championships.
Wrestlers.
Wrestlers. Powerlifting. So when do people put their foot down? Because what I'm curious about is, okay, say if all of the multi-millionaire CEOs of all these companies, if they come out tomorrow and say, hey, we all identify as women, does the gender gap discussion go away?
That's
that's a good point.
No, and it is. That's one of my biggest problems with that conversation is, look, you want to identify as a woman. If you're a man and you want to, biologically you're a man and you want to identify as a woman, I don't care.
No.
If you're a woman and you want to identify as a man, I don't care. But biologically, your muscle makeup, all those things, if you're a guy, you're a guy. And you're going to be stronger than all the other women. Now, they're going to be those fringe athletes who are just so athletic that they can keep up. But if you get into power sports and things like that, dude, there's no way a woman can keep up with a man. There's just no way.
It's almost like we suspended common sense for feelings. As a social justice warrior, I'll say that, even me. Dude, if you want me to call you Teresa, a man, no problem with that. But when it comes to government issues, which is school or prisons or anything else, then we have to go by your biological makeup.
Because science is a real thing.
Now, here's where I see that actually is going to come to an end, because people are going to get so pissed off because they're going to keep pushing the Overton window to a point. People are going to get fired up. If you go to a large company and you say, well, I identify as this, they're going to accommodate whatever you want to do. But what happens when people say, if I lose my job and I say, okay, well, I'm being discriminated against because I'm elderly. And they say, well, you're not elderly, you're 39 years old. Yeah, well, I've lived a hard life and I've been through a lot, and I identify as an elderly person.
I want my senior citizen
discount.
Right,
well, that sounds ridiculous, but biologically, that could be just as accurate or more accurate than saying that I'm a woman.
Well, one of the videos, and I know you don't like Ben Shapiro, but I do like Ben Shapiro. I think he's a common sense guy. I disagree with a lot of what he says, but at least I can say we disagree, and I can see his point even though I disagree with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
But one of the things that he said that really made sense to me, he was debating, he was giving a lecture at one of these places, and he does a Q&A at the end. And the young lady says, they're asking about gender identity. He said, well, how old are you? She said, I'm 22, whatever she said. He goes, why aren't you 76? She goes, because I'm 22. She goes, isn't that the same thing? But just because you don't, what if you felt like you were 76? Would that make you 76? Well, no. Well, just like if you don't have the biological makeup of a man, it doesn't make you a man. I mean, you can feel like you are whatever you want to say you are, but you still are what you are.
Right.
Now, if you want to have surgeries and all that stuff, now we're talking about a different ballgame, I think. If a woman gets arrested who was previously a man and now is no longer has the anatomy of a man, now I think she goes to a woman's prison. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But if you still have the anatomy of a man, then that's how you should be identified.
That's right.
Through government agencies.
Right. I agree with that. So, speaking of stay ahead of the news, all right, and this is something we didn't really prep this. Normally before the show, we'll kind of have an idea of what we want to talk about. And this is something I just saw Trump tweeted the other day, and he was talking about Joe Biden, and specifically Joe Biden's son. When Joe Biden was vice president, his son worked for energy companies in China and Ukraine. And I think, and Trump was really just kind of saying, why is that not being looked into? Now, I've always kind of been of the opinion, to the victor goes the spoils. Sometimes there's going to be things like that where because of his dad's position in life gives him an opportunity to maybe go somewhere and make some money. But I think in the coming weeks, this could be a bigger story. Specifically, maybe the whole Russia thing being a diversion for the Ukraine and China and maybe the previous administration. Brad, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, basically, I think what we know now, the thing about Hunter Biden has been, that's a couple of years old, as far as him being, what was that, Burisma Holdings, I think is what it's called. It was a gas company. And this gas company was owned by Mykola Zelinsky. I can't pronounce the name. But anyway, he held a dictatorship with that company, and he was making like $50,000 a year off of it. So the Zlochevsky, he ends up basically getting exiled and run out of town. Well, there was the Ukrainian government appointed this guy, Viktor Shokin, as a prosecutor. And he was investigating all this stuff. So Biden came in, and there was, I think, $1 billion in some kind of guaranteed loans that they had promised them, and Biden threatened to withhold those loans if they didn't get rid of that prosecutor.
And it was because that prosecutor was looking into Biden's son, right? And how that whole thing kind of put together. So Biden basically threatened them to withhold these loans if they didn't fire.
And this was something that this part, Biden admitted this. He was at some meeting. I think it was actually it was some event that was sponsored by the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah, I actually saw the video the other day.
And he said that like I said, you can pull up the video and listen to him say it. And then some people say, well, that prosecutor, some people thought he was crooked from inside the country. And okay, well, if that's the case, then get another prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
But it just went away. So the big argument is, well, why would Trump's White House be having any kind of conversations with Ukraine about this? But there was no issue when the Obama White House asked Ukraine to investigate Trump during the election.
And that was kind of a last-minute addition here to our topics for today. And JD, I don't know if you have any comment on that, but I think that's something for the people listening to kind of maybe dig into a little bit, see what the backstory is, and then let's see how things unfold, because I feel like Trump is, this is one of the other things we always say about Trump, is he may be playing the other side here with this whole situation.
Yeah, I'm afraid that, and this is the thing about politics, man. Who's going to be Trump's main? Who's going to run against Trump for the Democratic ticket? This all this debate and stuff is grandstanding. Biden's going to be the nominee, guys. And
I disagree.
I think this is a preparation for that. I really do. I mean, just from what little I've only looked at it 10 minutes.
Right.
Biden has been an absolute train wreck. You know, he's having gaffes every day, everywhere that he goes.
Have you seen the other alternatives, bro?
No, I'm with you there. I'm with you there.
We can't disagree. But no, I just think as far as for people to kind of think about, and even you, JD, that may be something to kind of dig into a little bit, because I think this will become a bigger story in the next few weeks. So, all right, so our last segment that we always do is our college football picks. But before we get into that, something that's sports related that I wanted to kind of get into was Antonio Brown and that mess. And so my man seems like a diva to me, you know, for the Steelers. He always criticized Big Ben, and that was an issue. So, you know, Pittsburgh cuts him. I mean, this man is a phenomenal talent. I mean, he's a phenomenal wide receiver. Goes out to the Raiders, ends up having an issue with the GM there, so they cut him. He goes to the Patriots, and of course, the reason that I guess he got cut from the Patriots is because of all these sexual assault allegations that have come up. Specifically with, I can't remember the lady's name, Brittany something.
Taylor.
Brittany Taylor. And this morning, first thing I get up, I'm reading, and he goes into a tweet storm. And he throws Robert Kraft under the bus, says that he got caught, you know, in a massage parlor down in Florida. Yeah. Nothing happened to him. And then Big Ben several years ago got a 4-game suspension, and he got accused of sexual assault. So why is this happening to him?
Right. So I want to back up and give everybody the background on Antonio Brown, where he came from, what his whole deal is. So he's like a lot of young African American men who made it big in the NFL. He came from an urban population in Miami. Ended up going to college at Central Michigan University. Was drafted in like the 6th round by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2010. All right. And was an awesome addition to that team for a long time. He came in with those times when Mike Wallace was the man in Pittsburgh, but Antonio was such a talent, you know, they just had to give him the ball, right? Last couple of years, he's been causing a lot of problems. You know, I feel like first off, Mike Tomlin has totally lost the Pittsburgh Steelers. Lost control of the locker room. I mean, guys like Antonio Brown, it's easy to do though. But one of the things Antonio Brown did in Pittsburgh was get on his social media in the locker room after Mike Tomlin asked him not to do that, you know, and it caused Mike Tomlin a big headache. So then last year, Juju Smith-Schuster comes along. He's rising up. He's starting to get more balls his way. Antonio Brown's not happy about it because now he's not the guy anymore. Just like he took over when Mike Wallace was, you know, there. So basically, his time in Pittsburgh's run up. So they've sent him to Oakland for like a 3rd and 5th round pick, which I know don't sound like a lot, but guys, draft picks are like gold in the NFL. So sent him to Oakland. And his contract in Oakland was 3 years, $39 million. So in March, the NFL sends down new protocols for helmets. I mean, you know that the head injuries were a big deal in the NFL. So you got to wear a certain type of helmet. So he has a fit about not being able to wear his old helmet. He even goes so far as to painting his helmet to look like a different model helmet so he can keep wearing his helmet. So that didn't go over well. Oakland gets it fixed finally. That's in March. So late July comes around, and they end up having to put Antonio Brown on the non-football injury list because the bottom of his feet are frostbite.
That's right, from the
cryotherapy chamber. And did you see the picture of that?
Yeah, that was crazy.
It's crazy. Did you see it, Brad? It's nasty, man. Nasty.
It's nasty. He basically got frostbitten, essentially.
Oh, it was crazy. So then, after all this happens, they finally get him on the field for practice, and Brown threatens to beat up their GM, Mike Mayock, right in the middle of the practice, throws a ball at him, everything.
Is that frowned upon?
In most circles. If you don't think it's frowned upon, go to work tomorrow and throw some shit at your GM. So they suspended him for a couple days after that. So then John Gruden, who's the head coach of Oakland, comes out on Friday before week 1 and says, okay, Brown is not suspended. We're definitely playing him Sunday. He's going to play. Saturday comes around, they release him. So Saturday evening, he signs with the Patriots. That's when the sexual allegations came out. Now, these sexual allegations, and I don't want to be the guy who, they call it the victim shamer. But man, this lady says that he was sexually assaulting her for a long, long time. And I don't know the mindset, like I said, man. I'm from rural Eastern Kentucky. And I know I'm good looking, but I've never been sexually assaulted too many times. You know what I mean? And I'll be honest with you. If I was sexually assaulted and I was uncomfortable with it, I would continue to hang out with the perpetrator. Does that make sense to you guys?
Was she an employee?
She was a trainer. They went to college together. And they run around the same circle. Anyway, they did have a personal relationship. It's obvious that I've seen the pictures of them together and all this stuff. And so I'm not saying he's justified in any sexual predatory acts or anything like that. But I also know that if I'm getting advanced upon and I don't like it, I don't continue to hang out with those people. Does that make sense?
Wasn't there some pretty graphic messages?
Some text, some kind of text that he sent her, or maybe some of these other people.
I don't know. I know he apologized to her for some of the sexual advances he made. One of the things said, one of the articles I read said she was on her iPad watching church service, and he basically masturbated on her back, and she was like, on her, and so I guess she separated herself from him for a while. Then he messaged her, apologizing, it never happened again. So then she goes out with a big group of friends. She ends up back in his house, and she says he forcibly rapes her.
And all that kind of blew up because I guess there was some kind of a settlement agreement. It was a couple $1 million or whatever, and he was supposed to have signed it by a certain day.
Yeah, I think
he didn't sign it.
I think he has a history of doing those things too, man. Sign these contracts and just not fulfilling his part. But now, and I want to be fair to him because I also know when you get money and you're young and you can make some really silly decisions and be set up quick. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. So, there's just been a mess, man. It's been a funny thing. Knowing where he come from and how hard he worked to get to where he's at. And to see him flip the switch from being, I'm going to grind it out and make it work, to everybody owes me everything.
Yeah. You want a real interesting take on the whole Antonio Brown situation? Follow the Twitter account of Larry Johnson, former Chiefs running back.
Okay.
You know who Larry Johnson is?
I didn't know if you was talking about the grandmama or the ex-Chiefs running back, Larry Johnson, bro.
The guy that was the running back for the Chiefs, Larry Johnson. I'm not going to go into it, but let's just say that Beelzebub gets mentioned. And if you want an entertaining read or just a totally kind of off-the-wall perspective about that, and maybe some of the other things that we've talked about with Epstein and this Ed Buck guy and some of the other things, just check that out. It's pretty nuts.
So here's a question I've got, because everything in our life has turned into a reality show. Right? We've had the reality shows on TV. I mean, you think back to the started with the talk shows, and then you got into, the Ricky Lakes and Jerry Springers, and then everything was about chaos and drama and all these different stories and storylines. That's obviously how politics is run now. And those things happen, I don't think it's much just because the stories are there, but because they have identified as human beings that we are going to gravitate to. We need the superhero, we need the villain, we need the chaos, we need this. So do you all think with any of these stories, maybe not so much Antonio Brown, just sounds like there's a lot of chaos going on, but these things tend to happen in the prime time. So you're going into a season right now where a lot of people have stepped away from NFL football, right, over the last couple of years.
Right.
You got the season just starting. You've got the big drama story.
Yeah.
Now you've got people
pulled in
that are pulled into this story. Okay, well, what's going on with Antonio Brown and whatever? And because personally, I don't even watch the NFL. I saw this story pop up and I was like, well, that's interesting. When you're sitting there reading it. So whatever the case is with this, It just seems like that everything around us is being set up like an episode of the Kardashians.
It's drama, right? And here is to your point. I'm glad you brought that up, because in doing research for this, I put in NFL's best just to see what the Google suggestions were. And here's what the top suggestions were: NFL's best: bodies, uniforms, houses, tattoos, cars, physiques, friends. Now, what I was looking for was NFL's best charities, because professional sports athletes, especially the NFL guys, do a lot of amazing work for the communities they work and live in. And I want to just mention some of them because I think it's worth getting this stuff out there, man. People need to know the good work that's being done too. J.J. Watt, raised $37 million of relief for Hurricane Harvey all across Texas. Carson Wentz, his Audience of One Foundation, he hands out food with a food truck in Philadelphia to homeless people. The Drew Brees Foundation helps Operation Kids, which is another foundation, build parks, youth athletics programs, playgrounds, and does USO work. The Drew Brees Foundation has raised over $22 million to support cancer victims. Richard Sherman runs the Richard Sherman Family Foundation to ensure as many children as possible are provided with proper school supplies and adequate clothing.
And see, why can't, and again, that's me being me, but I didn't really know any of that.
Right.
And that's awesome.
No, but that was to my point, to Brad's point. There's no bad guy. They don't sell. Those are good things that nobody's reporting on now, because it doesn't have the protagonist. But guys, those are stories worthy of news.
This should be front page.
This should be front
page. Absolutely, because those are inspirational.
Right.
Because those guys do, I mean, they're making a ton of money. They're living this lavish lifestyle. They get a lot of bad press, and of course, that's what makes the headline. When those things should be making the headlines.
Sure.
Because they're not all bad. Some of them are bad, I'm sure. I mean, like I said, I'm not sure what the whole Antonio Brown and his thing is. I find it interesting just as a sports fan, to kind of check into it. But as a being like totally interested in it, I'm not as maybe so much as the others. But I find those things, those are great.
Yeah.
And that's what should be out there. And those things should inspire people, everyday people, to know, hey, these guys are doing that.
Right. And that's like, no matter what side of the Kaepernick thing you come down on, man, there's not all bad in the NFL. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of these guys doing a lot of good work.
Mm-hmm.
And then these guys, thank God for them. I remember, I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan. And I don't know if you guys remember Derek Thomas or not.
Oh, yeah.
But he was maybe my favorite Chief of all time, probably. But he had the Third Down and Long Foundation. And literacy was his big deal. Providing books for kids in the Kansas City area.
He was just an overall solid guy, wasn't he?
He was a good
Derek
dude,
Thomas,
yeah.
He was just a good man.
But there's a lot more of those guys in the NFL than there are divas in the NFL. And so, if you're boycotting the NFL because of Kaepernick or some Trudeau almost personality or Antonio Brown, guys, there's a lot more going on than just those guys.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point to make.
I don't watch the NFL just because it just doesn't interest me. I love college football.
Right.
I just don't watch the NFL.
Right.
But that's a great point. And a lot of these guys, even the divas,
Do a lot of work.
are doing great things in the community.
Sure.
And I would say, well, now let's do politicians. What do you think? You're not going to get anything close to the giving. Now, the people that tell you that you've got to give and you've got to do this, and this person, they're not getting this and they need this and they need this. You look at their giving versus the people outside politics that are actually stepping into the arena, going into their communities and helping these kids.
And, you can say what you want to. You guys, I'm sure you know Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins. They're way liberal people. But, man, those are people who put their money where their mouth are. They give to a lot of charities, a lot of organizations, a lot of social programs they believe in. They're always supporting them.
That's good.
And I think that's one of the things we want to do eventually with this program, right? Is just to help build out our community.
Yeah, if we can gain the audience and gain that kind of backing, I know we've talked about trying to support youth sports in our area.
For sure.
because we all, have a passion for that, and I hope that we can someday do that. I mean, I know as a local business owner, I give money to all the sports teams and try to do that and try to have a positive impact. My success has been able to allow me to kind of share in those ways, because the people that are running those organizations are the ones who are buying houses and doing the things that make my business successful.
Right.
So, all right, guys. So y'all ready for the last segment? I know JD is.
The high school team. We
Oh,
had
yeah,
a
go
bye
ahead.
this past week, but the weekend before last Friday, we played really well. We won 48-8. It was awesome. Brad was
I
there.
was there. Did you see me up in the stands?
Brad was there. I seen you walk in. Brad took some pictures of me with my fans.
I think you need to share some of those.
Yeah, I probably do. Yeah. And he took one picture of me and circled my butt. He goes, "I don't know much about football. I know tight end when I see you one."
I love those.
So,
No,
but anyway, we was off this past week. We got a big district going into district play this week against Bath County.
I think RPI wise, we were ranked 9th in the state.
We were not, but
in our
after this
class.
bye week, we're not.
Right.
But it's fine.
No, I'm excited, man. That was a pretty dominating game that they played against that team. I mean, we looked really good.
That team has beat us. Last year they shut us out.
Really?
Yeah. And
That's a big flip.
yeah, we've got a lot better. We had a big off season. We're learning. Our football IQ's much higher than it's ever been.
Well, that's good, man.
All right, football picks.
All right, so
I'm ready.
I know you're ready. JD had a good week. JD managed to go 4-1.
Making my move, baby.
That's what he says. Let me get my glasses on here. All right, so
What's overall records?
So I went 3-2. I'm 11-8 overall. Brad had an off week for him. He went 2-3. He's now 13-6 overall. And JD went 4-1 and is 11-8 overall. So JD and I are tied. Brad still got the lead, but that lead is slimming. And I think JD's been looking at some Elizabeth Warren shirts for Brad.
For sure.
Yeah. So, and we always kind of talk about Kentucky. Laid an egg against Mississippi State. Had multiple opportunities to win that game, and just didn't.
As frustrating as it's been over the years watching Kentucky football, and I'm glad the expectations changed, because we went there. I expected us to win that ball game, but man, it was frustrating to watch. That was a frustrating game.
It was really frustrating because we made a lot of mistakes.
Dropped a lot of balls.
Dropped a lot of balls. I mean, we were running the ball, and then we went away from it. Sawyer made some bad decisions throwing the ball. His first pass of the game was a pick six.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It was frustrating. So, all right. So, the picks this week, guys. First game is NC State at Florida State, and Florida State is a 5.5-point favorite. Florida State beat Louisville. That always makes me happy. And that was a pretty interesting game because Florida State was up like 21-0. Louisville came back, got up 24-21. And then ended up getting beat like 35-21 or something like that. So, Brad, we're going to let you start. NC State at Florida State. Florida State 5.5-point favorite.
NC State.
JD?
Making my move, baby. Florida State.
I'm going Florida State on that one too. I think they're coming on.
It's at Tallahassee, right? Yeah.
It's at Tallahassee. All right, next game. Number 21 USC at number 17 Washington. Washington is a 7.5-point favorite. I'll start on this one. I'm going Washington. I think Washington covers that 7.5 points.
Washington.
I'm going Washington too. That's a tough game. That's
That's a
one,
tough
man.
game to pick.
Yeah. When you said that, I was like, man, I don't know. That's a tough.
Yeah, that's a tough game to pick. All right, Mississippi State, who just beat the Cats this past weekend at number 7 Auburn. Auburn is a 7-point favorite.
Auburn.
Auburn for me too. I think Auburn will wipe the field with them. All right, and I think this is an interesting matchup, and I'm surprised that the point spread is this close. Number 6 Ohio State is a 7-point favorite at Nebraska.
See, man, that throws up a red flag to me. I'm going with the Buckeyes.
I'll go with the Buckeyes on that one too, but I'm surprised that spread is that close.
Yeah.
I'm going with the Buckeyes too.
Dude, I mean,
Brad was wanting me to go to Nebraska.
there is.
He's like, yeah.
There is a kid that played. He's a running back from Nebraska that had committed to Kentucky. He's from Kentucky.
Robinson, Wandale Robinson.
And had a breakout game in the last game. I didn't watch it, but he apparently had a pretty good game.
He's athletic. Man.
Yeah. All right, and the last game is Kentucky at South Carolina. South Carolina is a 2.5-point favorite.
CATS, baby.
Oh, I'm going Cats all the way. I think we bounce back. We've owned South Carolina I think we beat them 6 games in a row. I think Muschamp officially gets fired after we go down there and beat him, but I think we're going to bounce back and beat South Carolina.
Cats.
Cats all the way.
So we just disagreed on one? That sucks.
Yeah, I'm going to have to. It's really hard trying to find these lines because the lines don't always come out, right away. So it's kind of hard to find the games to pick. All right, guys, that'll wrap the show up for this week. We appreciate y'all listening. And once again, want to tell you, if you're listening and you like what we're doing, go to YouTube and subscribe to the Just Add Bourbon podcast audio channel. We would really appreciate it. You can also catch us on iTunes, Podbean app, Spotify. We're kind of all over the place now. And we appreciate everybody listening. I think we've almost hit 1,000 downloads, and I think that's probably a much higher number than any of us expected when we first started this. So guys, no matter how bad your week's been, no matter how bad your day's going, if you just add bourbon, it'll always get a little bit better. Thanks guys, see you next week.